I've never talked about this outside my closest circle, but it's real. I was there. I saw everything. It started when my best friend Caleb inherited an old Winnebago from his grandfather. The thing looked like a relic, rust patches, cracked windows, the whole deal. But somehow, it still ran. We were both 22, burnout from college, and desperate for something that didn't feel like another day in the same old routine. So we hit the road. The plan, if you could even call it that, was to head down through the Appalachians. Caleb said he wanted to see stars without any city lights in the way. I was in. So was our other friend, Jonah. We packed some food, tossed a speaker in the back, and took off with zero prep. No route, no reservations, just vibes. The first couple of days were exactly what we needed. Empty roads, tiny towns, endless trees. Every time we lost cell signal, it felt like we were shedding something, notifications, responsibilities, the noise of everyday life. Just us and the mountains. On the third night, we pulled off near a trailhead somewhere in western North Carolina. Caleb mentioned the town's name once, but none of us remembered it afterward. We parked the camper and cracked a few beers under the stars. That's when Caleb brought up the hot spring. Locals only, he said. Totally off the grid. He dropped a pin before we lost service. It seemed random, but we were bored and curious enough to give it a shot. Around 9:30 p.m., we piled back into the camper and followed his offline map. The road narrowed quickly, trees leaning in from both sides like they were closing in on us. We hadn't seen a house in miles, and there were no streetlights, just our headlights cutting through the dark. Jonah had passed out in the back. Caleb drove. I sat up front, eyes locked on the road. And then we almost hit them. Two figures standing right in the middle of our lane. Caleb slammed the brakes. The tires skidded, the camper fishtailed, and we missed them by inches. It was a woman and a little boy just walking. No flashlight, no shoes on the kid. The woman wore a long, heavy shawl, the kind you'd wear to a funeral. Neither of them reacted. Didn't flinch, didn't even seem to notice the camper. What the hell? Caleb muttered. Was that real? I looked at him, heart pounding. Did we just almost hit a child? There was no one around, no houses, no signs of life. Just dark trees and a road that seemed to stretch on forever. I pulled out my phone. The GPS was frozen, a blue, sitting in a blank green void. No road names, no landmarks. We kept going, unsettled, but unsure what else to do. Eventually, we reached the spot from Caleb's map. There was a clearing with a dirt lot and a few RVs already parked, 5 or 6, I think. We'd expected it to be empty. Instead, it was chaos. People were running around with flashlights, yelling. One woman was sobbing. A child had gone missing. A couple rushed over the second they saw us pull in. The woman was frantic. Please, she said, voice breaking. Have you seen a little boy? Blonde, 3 years old, in pajamas. He was just with us, and now he's gone. Something clicked in my chest. I turned to Caleb. The dash cam. We showed them the footage. When the woman saw it, she broke down completely. That's Jacob, she whispered. That's our son. They asked us to take them to the exact spot. Caleb turned the camper around, and 3 other cars followed us. Jonah woke up partway through and asked what was going on. We didn't answer. As we retraced our route, I scanned every inch of the roadside like my life depended on it. And then we found him, curled up near a drainage pipe, crying. Caleb stopped. His parents ran and scooped him up. He was okay, just cold and scared. The police arrived not long after. They called it an attempted abduction, but no one could explain how someone had gotten into the camp without being seen, or how the boy had ended up almost a mile from where he disappeared. When they asked Jacob what happened, he said a lady took his hand and told him to come for a walk. She said she'd bring him back soon. Then she told him to wait by the road and walked into the woods. Told him to stay quiet. We gave the dash cam footage to the cops. 2 weeks later, they gave it back, no leads, no suspects. But I still remember her face from that video. The way she smiled. It didn't look right. It wasn't just off, it looked like her face didn't know how to smile. Like someone had told her what a human expression should look like, and she got it wrong. I went back to that road a year later. Thought maybe I'd imagined it. But the turnoff was gone. Trees had reclaimed everything. The trailhead was erased. The lot was padlocked. The pin Caleb dropped on his offline map? It's not there anymore. No history, no coordinates, as if it was never marked at all. But it happened. I know it did. I still have the footage. I was 22 when this happened, old enough to regret being wrong about things, young enough to still think I was invincible. That summer, my best friend Josh and I decided to drive across the country. We didn't have jobs lined up or much of a plan, just that restless need to get out, to feel like we were doing something big before adulthood locked the doors behind us. Josh had this ancient Subaru, dented on every panel, but with an engine that refused to quit. We stuffed it with clothes, a cooler full of gas station sandwiches, and a half-dead Bluetooth speaker we duct-taped to the dash. We were somewhere near the Tennessee line when Josh spotted an alternate route on his phone. "This way's better," he said. "Goes through the mountains. Super scenic. Adds like 2 hours max." I should have checked the map. Should have asked more questions. But I was tired, and it sounded harmless enough. Just a longer route through the trees. No big deal. The road started fine, quiet, a little winding, but normal. The farther we went, the narrower it got, until the center lines vanished and the trees pressed in from both sides. The GPS lost signal about 20 minutes in. We figured we'd just keep going until we hit the next town. Then we saw a sign. Old, splintered, leaning slightly off its post. Los 8 miles. Josh snorted. Sounds like a Halloween haunted house. I just nodded, but my stomach did this little flip. It wasn't the name that bothered me. It was the way the letters were painted. Jagged, uneven, like someone wrote it with their non-dominant hand in a rush. We kept driving. At exactly 8 miles, the car stalled. Not like it ran out of gas. 1 second we were moving, next nothing. The engine died, without a sound. No warning lights, no sputtering, just silence. Josh swore and turned the key again and again. The dashboard lit up, the battery was fine, but all we got was that dry, echoing click. We popped the hood. Nothing seemed wrong. No smoke, no leaks. But the engine wouldn't even try. That's when I realized how quiet it was. Not peaceful. Dead. Like someone hit mute on the whole world. No birds, no bugs, not even wind in the trees. Josh muttered something about walking to town. I agreed, even though part of me already knew we weren't going to find anything. We followed the road with a flashlight, sticking close. For a while, it was just empty woods. Then, the animals started showing up. First, a fox lying on the shoulder, mouth open, eyes clouded. No blood. Then a raccoon. Then a deer. All the same, like they'd just fallen over mid-step. Nothing messy. Just wrong. Then Josh stopped. He pointed at the fox. "Same white spot on the ear," he said. "That's the same fox." A few minutes later, we saw it again. And again. Like the road was on a loop, and we were too slow to notice until now. "We're not getting anywhere," Josh said. "This is messed up." I nodded. We turned around, but the path back didn't feel familiar. The bends were different. The trees leaned differently. And I started noticing carvings, initials, names we hadn't seen before. One tree had a mitten nailed to it, just a single kid's mitten. Another had a pile of stones underneath, with fresh dirt scattered around. Then we heard it. Whispers. At first, it sounded like wind in the leaves, but there was a rhythm to it. Not English. Not anything I recognized. Just low, steady chanting, the kind that gets into your spine before your ears. We didn't even talk about it. We just ran. Branches scratched my arms. The flashlight bounced, then slipped from Josh's hand. He yelled, once, sharp and sudden, and then nothing. I didn't stop. Eventually, I crashed into a clearing, out of breath, bleeding from somewhere on my face. The car was there, but not in the same spot. The passenger door was wide open. My bag was gone. And scratched deep into the hood were the words, "Asterisk. You brought him back." Asterisk. I don't remember sitting down. Just that the car started on its own. Engine alive, lights on. I gripped the wheel like it was the only thing holding me to the world and hit the gas. I drove for hours without stopping. Didn't care where I ended up. Eventually, I found a sheriff's station in a town whose name I don't even remember. I told them everything about the car, the whispers, the words on the hood, Josh vanishing into the dark. They sent out a search team, but they came back empty-handed. No trace of Josh. No record of any place called Lost Hollow. They said people get turned around in those woods all the time. Made it sound normal, like it was just another Tuesday. It's been a few years now. I don't hike. I don't camp. I don't even drive near mountains if I can help it. I moved to Western Virginia a while back when I took a job as a state trooper. Didn't have much tying me down where I was, and at first, the idea of wide open land and quieter roads sounded like peace. But the truth is, this place isn't as calm as it seems from the outside. Sure, it's got scenic overlooks and postcard-perfect mountain views, but underneath all that beauty, there's a lot of weird stuff, sad stuff, dangerous stuff. The kind of things people in town don't like to talk about. Out here, you don't just write tickets or patrol school zones. You end up wearing every hat in the book: EMT, counselor, conflict mediator. Once, I helped deliver a baby on the side of a highway. Another time, I pulled a body out of a ravine that had been there so long it barely looked human anymore. You stop flinching after a while. You adapt. But it does something to your head. My way of dealing with the pressure's always been the same: get behind the wheel and drive. Doesn't matter where, just put on some old playlists, hit the back roads, and let the miles drain whatever tension's been sitting in my chest. That's what led me to a local car group, not official or anything, just a loose circle of gearheads and weekend warriors who like to cruise and swap stories. One of them was a guy named Logan. At least, I thought that was his name. The Logan I knew was easy to be around, clean-cut. Always smelled like motor oil and leather conditioner, spent more time under the hood of his souped-up Honda than he probably did sleeping. We did one late-night run together through the Blue Ridge Parkway, fog rolling over the road like smoke, headlights catching glimpses of deer in the brush, tires humming against the asphalt. It was one of those surreal drives where you forget the world's a mess. We said we'd do it again. So when I got a message a few weeks later, *, been a while. You free for a ride sometime? *, I assumed it was him. I had the weekend off, no shifts, nothing urgent hanging over me. I texted back a time. The reply came quick. *, perfect. Let's make a little trip of it. Maybe even find a trail to hike. *. I hesitated at that. Logan wasn't the hiking type. He used to joke that the only mountain he liked was under his tires. I scrolled up, checked the number, and that's when I saw it. Different number. Different profile photo. That wasn't Logan from the car club. It was another guy I'd met way back, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, during one of those chaotic college-era festival weekends full of noise, bad beer, and bonding with strangers you never expected to see again. He was a photography major, I think. Into nature shots, forests, abandoned buildings. We'd stayed in touch in that background noise kind of way, likes on Instagram, the occasional message about a new album dropping. That was it. Honestly, I should have backed out. But something in me said, *, don't. I don't know if it was guilt, boredom, or just the need to feel something different for a day. So I went through with it. We decided on a trail near the Tennessee border, remote but supposedly scenic. I picked him up at the Marion bus station. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked like he'd been living outside for months, hair long and stringy, beard uneven, like it had grown out of neglect. His jacket was heavy-duty, the kind construction workers wear on sites, but worn thin. His boots were caked with dried mud. His backpack looked like it had been dragged through hell. And then there was the smell: sweat, damp fabric, soil. It reminded me of the folks we find sleeping under overpasses. But he smiled when he saw me. There was this spark in his face, like he really meant it when he said, *man, it's been too long. *. I nodded and told him to toss his bag in the back. We made a quick stop at a hardware store for supplies: water, protein bars, a lighter, basic trail stuff. That's when he mentioned a different trail. Said it was better than the one we'd planned. A hidden gem, he called it. Not on any maps.
Follows a creek, he said.
Way better photos. I pulled it up on GPS. It was out there, past the last paved road. Barely a blip on the screen, but legit enough. I've patrolled worse. Remote didn't scare me. We drove out past the town limits, past cell towers and gas stations and pavement, until the road gave way to dirt and gravel. Eventually, we stopped next to what was once a barn, now just a pile of collapsed beams and a leaning fence. The trailhead wasn't even a trail. It was a slit in the woods, choked with brambles. No sign. No cell signal. He took the lead. I followed. At first it was okay, quiet, kind of pretty in that forgotten forest way. He talked the whole time, but not really to me. More like out loud. He rambled about jobs he'd had, construction, landscaping, kitchen work. Said his girlfriend left him. Said people didn't understand what it meant to stay grounded. Then, as we climbed over a log, he asked, if someone turned on you out here, how would you handle it? He said it like he was asking about the weather. I kept my voice steady. Stay calm. Keep your eyes open. Always have an exit. He nodded. Didn't say anything else. Just kept walking. That's when my gut started to tighten. We crossed an old, rusted-out piece of machinery, maybe part of an old mill. The trail dipped into a ravine, and eventually we reached a clearing with a half-collapsed structure. Looked like an old mill or maybe a mine building. Moss-covered, crumbling. There was a fire ring in the center, and what used to be a bench made from railroad ties. He said, this is it. I dropped my pack, started unpacking lunch, told him to gather some kindling. That's when he opened his backpack. First, a coil of rope. Then a hatchet. Then 2 knives, one a long, serrated survival blade. He laid them out neatly, like he was prepping for something more than a campfire. I didn't flinch. Didn't move. Just took it in. I unclipped my own knife, a folding one I always keep on my belt, and placed it beside the food.
Calm.
Deliberate. He looked at it, then at me. Oh, he said flatly. You brought one, too. That's when I knew he hadn't expected me to be ready. He stood up, grabbed the axe, and walked into the woods. I didn't eat. I didn't sit. I just stood still, listening. Every sound felt like it was crawling up my spine. When he came back, he had branches in one arm. The axe was still in the other. He looked at me and said, I'm sorry. My hands curled into fists. I'm sorry we're out here alone with knives. Then, slowly, he stepped toward me and said, maybe we should hug. I kept my voice steady. Nah. Let's get the fire going. Eat something. Recharge. He stared for a second, then turned and walked back toward the brush. That was it. I packed up fast. Said the wood was too wet. Time to head back before the weather turned. He didn't fight me. Just nodded. Quiet now. The hike back was slow. His energy had changed. He muttered to himself, half-finished thoughts about being used, about betrayal, about how people only call when they want something. I stayed between him and the tree line, always moving. When we got back to the trailhead, there they were, people. A couple of families loading kayaks into a trailer nearby. I didn't even try to hide my relief. He looked at me and asked, you driving me back? I shook my head. Got to call.
Got to go now.
Sorry. He just nodded. Didn't blink. Didn't move. I got in my car and drove until I hit a major road with actual traffic. Stopped at a gas station, locked the doors, and sat with the engine running for almost an hour. That night, I blocked his number. I didn't delete the messages. Instead, I called someone who knew him better. Told him everything, the knives, the question, the apology. He listened, then said Logan had been slipping lately, isolating, stopped responding to family. Rumors of a breakdown. I told him someone needed to step in. Seriously. A couple weeks passed. Then I got a message. He's in therapy. On medication. Trying to get better. I told him I was glad. And I meant it. But I also meant what I said to myself the whole ride back. Asterisk, he's never getting in my car again. Not here. Not anywhere, asterisk. I'm 32. Been hiking since I was a teenager. Grew up just outside of Elkridge, Maryland. Enough wilderness to get lost in, but not so much that you really could. My dad took me on weekend hikes when I was a kid, and it just stuck. There's something about being out in the woods. No phones, no engines, no lights. Just the crunch of leaves underfoot and your own breathing. I always found peace in it. Which is probably why what happened last fall still keeps me up at night. It was a simple idea. Me, my cousin Nate, and our buddy Joel planned a weekend hike out in the Appalachian backcountry. Nothing hardcore, just something off the grid. Nate had been down one of his internet rabbit holes again. He gets into weird stuff sometimes, and this time he'd found a trail that wasn't marked, wasn't official. Supposedly, it cut through some truly untouched forest near a place called Ridgewater. A guy on an old hiking forum had posted about it. No GPS coordinates, just vague directions, and a warning that it wasn't for beginners. He said it felt unspoiled and ancient, like nobody else was ever out there. Nate loved the idea. Joel and I were a little more skeptical, but we'd been talking about doing a serious hike for a while, and this was just enough of a challenge to be tempting. We set out Friday morning. It was about a 4-hour drive to the area, then another half-hour creeping along a dirt road until we hit this rusted livestock gate, chained open like someone had given up trying to close it decades ago. No signs. No trail ahead. Just a break in the trees and that sudden, overwhelming hush that settles in the moment the engine cuts off. We loaded up our gear, backpacks, sleeping bags, freeze-dried food, and started walking. At first, it was kind of perfect. Trees pressed close together, the trail barely more than a muddy thread through the underbrush. It felt like we'd stepped into someplace forgotten, not in a romantic, Instagram-worthy way, but more like someone had locked the door behind us without telling us. About 2 hours in, I realized the woods were too quiet. No birds. No bugs. Not even squirrels rustling in the brush. Just the soft thump of our boots and the occasional clink of Joel's water bottle against his pack. I mentioned it lightly. Nate shrugged. Guess it's just that kind of place. Joel didn't say anything. We kept going. We reached the clearing around 4:30. Nate had spotted it on satellite view, a bald patch of ground tucked into the crook of a slope. When we stepped into it, the hairs on my arms stood up. The space felt wrong. Not dangerous, exactly, but like walking into a room where someone had just had a fight. The tension was baked into the air. 3 logs were arranged around a fire pit, blackened and cracked but long unused. No fresh ash, just moss-covered rocks and the faint, lingering smell of sap and damp wood. We set up camp. Nate made jokes about forest cults. Joel kept checking the tree line like he expected something to walk out of it. I pretended to be fine, but I kept catching myself glancing over my shoulder. We ate canned chili and passed a bottle of whiskey around until it got dark. The fire we managed to build was pitiful, barely more than a flicker. The wood wouldn't catch right. It wasn't wet. It just didn't want to burn. That night, I didn't sleep much. My tent rustled now and then, and at one point, I swore I heard someone or something walking around the edge of the clearing. Not stomping. Not sneaking. Just pacing. I sat up, flashlight and knife in hand, and listened until morning. None of us said much over breakfast. We left our tents and gear behind and went looking for the ridge Nate had seen on the map. The view when we found it was stunning. Nothing but trees. No smoke, no towers, no signs of life. Just rolling green hills fading into blue. We stayed there a while, tossing snacks back and letting ourselves believe this trip had been a good idea. Then we started back. That's when everything fell apart. We took the same trail, or at least we thought we did. But after maybe an hour, nothing looked familiar. The moss was wrong. The trees were wrong. We passed a boulder none of us remembered, then came across a dry creek bed we should have crossed earlier but hadn't. I pulled out my compass. The trail was supposed to head south. The sun was now on our left. We were going east. Joel finally said what we were all thinking. We're lost. Nate argued at first, insisted we'd be fine, but his voice got thinner the longer we walked. And then we heard it. Snap. A branch, not a squirrel, not the wind. Something heavier. We stopped. I called out. Just a simple hello. Nothing. We turned around, tried a different route. After 20 minutes, somehow, we were back at the clearing. That should have been a relief, but one of the logs had been moved. It was subtle but obvious, just rotated slightly. I stared at it for a long second, and my mouth went dry. We didn't talk about it. We just started setting up for another night, pretending everything was fine. Joel tried to light the fire. Same thing, low flames, lots of smoke, no real heat. We ate in silence. I caught Joel gripping the handle of his hatchet until his knuckles turned white. That night, the woods went completely still. Not quiet, dead star. At some point, around 2 a.m., I woke up feeling like I couldn't breathe. Not a panic attack. Not fear. Just this weird, crushing stillness, like I'd been buried. I got out of the tent. The fire was out. Nate and Joel's tents were zipped tight. I clicked on my flashlight. It flickered once, then steadied. That's when I heard the footsteps again.
Slow.
Careful. Circling us. Then a sound right behind me. A breath, close enough that I felt the heat of it on my ear. I spun around, light raised. Nothing. Just trees. I backed into my tent and stayed there until morning. Knife in hand, heart hammering like a drumline in my chest. At dawn, Nate and Joel were already packed. No small talk. No, how'd you sleep? We just packed in silence. As I rolled up my tent, Joel let out this weird, low grunt and held something up. A small figure, sticks twisted into a crude human shape. Red thread wrapped around the arms and neck. It hadn't been there the night before. We burned it. Said nothing. The hike out was fast, no stops, no breaks. Somehow, we never got turned around. It was like the woods wanted us gone. Half a mile from the trucks, we passed a tree with fresh carvings. 3 stick figures, 1 tall, 2 shorter. No initials. Just crude, upright human shapes. Nate didn't stop. Joel didn't even look. I stared for maybe a second. Too long. We never spoke about it after. Nate moved to Philadelphia. Said he wanted to be closer to civilization. Joel quit hiking altogether. And me? I still get outside, but I stay on marked trails now. I stick close to towns. And I never go into woods that don't want me there. I've always been into hiking, not the Instagram waterfall kind, but the real stuff. Long trails, no cell signal, carrying everything on your back for days. I grew up near a small town called Jasper, not far from the Smoky Mountains, so the woods were pretty much my second home. I knew the trails, the moods of the mountains, even which ridgelines caught the worst of the wind on a bad day. It was like a language I never had to learn, it was just always there. Last fall, things in my life got loud. Work was insane. My sister was going through some drama I got dragged into. My brain felt like it had been buzzing nonstop for weeks. So, I decided to check out for a bit. I planned a solo hike, just me, 3 days, and a remote loop trail outside of Arden, Tennessee. It's not one of those trails you find in guidebooks or top 10 scenic hike lists. This one was barely marked, more like a whisper between trees than an actual path. It was mid-November, cold enough at night to bite, but still decent during the day. The forecast said dry skies, so I packed light. No rain cover, no snow gear. I started at this old forestry gate down a dirt road nobody maintains anymore. No signs. No people. Just forest. I'd mapped everything out, packed carefully, even left a note on my dashboard, just in case. Not because I thought I'd need rescuing. I'd done harder hikes. I just like being prepared. The first day went exactly how I needed it to. Quiet, a little foggy, that perfect kind of damp air, where everything smells like leaves and earth. The trail followed a ridge, and I got some gorgeous views of the valleys below, all rusty red and dull gold. I saw a few deer, scared off some turkeys, watched a hawk circling way above me. Classic solo hike stuff. By evening, I found a nice flat spot near a spring and set up camp. No phone signal, but honestly, that was the goal. The second day was when things started feeling off. Not I saw a ghost off, just a shift. The kind you don't notice right away, because it creeps in. The trees changed first, older, denser, their bark darker, almost burnt-looking. The trail started fading in and out until it was less of a path and more of a memory of one. I was using landmarks to navigate. Big mossy rocks, a bent tree, stuff like that. And then I realized how quiet it had gotten. Not peaceful quiet. This was dead quiet. No birds. No rustling leaves. No breeze. Just this heavy, smothering silence that felt wrong. I told myself it was just the valley acoustics, maybe the wind couldn't get down that far. But deep down I knew better. This wasn't just nature being calm. It felt vacant, like the forest was holding its breath. Then I saw it. A fire ring. Not a proper campsite, just a ring of stones about 20 feet off the trail, down a steep little slope. If I hadn't glanced sideways at the right moment, I would have missed it entirely. It was weirdly perfect. Circular, blackened in the center like it had seen fire, but not recently. The stones were old, pitted with time, some covered in lichen. No logs for sitting. No trash. No signs of recent use. Just a forgotten little fire ring in a place nobody should have ever camped. Naturally, I went down to check it out, because why not walk straight into the sketchy thing in the creepy woods, right? I figured maybe it was old, historic, or just weird. I sat on a fallen log nearby, had a snack, drank some water, tried to enjoy the stillness. But something about the air felt heavy, like the pressure had changed, like the atmosphere was pushing down just a little too much. That's when it shifted again. The silence didn't just feel quiet. It felt aware, like it was watching me. Not in a paranoid hiker kind of way, but in a deliberate way. It was like the forest wanted me to feel how alone I was. Like it was proving a point. I stood up fast, trying to shake it off. Told myself I was being dramatic, probably just hungry, tired, whatever. I grabbed my pack, turned to leave. And then I heard it. My name. Not echoing from the trees. Not whispered on the wind. It was inside my head, like someone had leaned right into the center of my brain and just said it.
Calm. Direct.
Personal. I froze completely. Tried to think of explanations. Memory glitch, stress hallucination. But it wasn't distant or dreamy. It was here.
Real.
Present. And then, asterisk bam, asterisk, something shoved my pack hard. I fell forward, caught myself against a tree. Instinct kicked in. I whipped around, heart pounding, fists half raised like that was going to help. No one. Nothing. I stood there for I don't know how long, just listening. Every part of me alert. I didn't hear branches cracking or animals running off. I didn't even feel wind. Just stillness. And whatever pushed me, it felt like a hand.
Solid. Real.
I bolted. Didn't check bearings. Didn't care. Just started scrambling uphill. The slope was brutal, but I didn't stop. My legs burned. I slipped more than once, got mud on my hands, tore my jacket. I didn't care. I had to get up.
Out.
It felt like the ridge was pulling away from me, like I was running in place. But I kept moving, kept climbing, glancing behind me like something might finally show itself. Nothing ever did. I hit the top and kept going.
Didn't rest. Didn't eat. Didn't even think.
Just followed the ridgeline until the trail showed up again. Even then, the silence didn't lift. It followed me all the way back to the gravel road. All the way to the car. I didn't stop walking until the engine was on, and the doors were locked. I drove 30 miles before I felt like I could think straight. No music. No calls. Just the road. I don't talk about it much. You tell someone you heard your name inside your own skull and got shoved by an invisible hand, and they look at you like you need sleep or therapy. Maybe I did. Still might. But I know what happened. It was real. Whatever was down there, it wasn't curious. It wasn't lost. It didn't want company. It knew me, knew my name, and for one long, terrible moment, it decided to let me know it was there. I still hike. I still love the mountains. Just never alone. And never again, anywhere near Arden. This happened last October, and I haven't been able to forget it. Not completely. Kasha and I had both hit a wall. She's a trauma nurse, working rotating night shifts in one of those ERs where every hour feels like an emergency. I work from home, freelance design stuff, logos, pitch decks, UX mock-ups, deadlines, revisions, more caffeine than sleep. Our schedules rarely lined up, and when they did, we were usually too burned out to enjoy it. It was like we were always missing each other in passing, more like roommates than a couple. So when she said, "Let's disappear for a few days," I didn't need to hear the rest. I just said, "Yeah, let's do it." She found this hike and campsite deep in Cherokee National Forest, not an official campground, just a spot she'd heard about from a patient's cousin or something. No cell service. No map trailhead. Just a GPS pin dropped near an old mining road. One of those places you could only get to if you knew it existed, or if you were actively trying to vanish for a bit. We packed light, too light. One oversized rental tent with questionable poles. A camp stove we'd never used before. A mismatched mess of vegetables and a kitchen knife, so dull it would have struggled with butter. I think we wanted to feel like we could still do things the hard way, like life hadn't made us too soft or too dependent on apps and supermarkets. We drove 3 hours from Knoxville, passed through a town I don't even remember, just gas stations and boarded-up diners. Eventually, we pulled off onto a gravel shoulder next to a faded gate covered in vines. That was our parking lot. The trail itself wasn't really a trail. It was a scar in the forest, just wide enough for us to walk single file. We kept climbing, switchbacks, roots, loose rock. The air was dense, and there was this stillness in the trees that didn't sit right. I kept glancing behind us like we'd missed a sound, but there was nothing. Just that quiet, crushing kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being listened to. It took about 2 hours to reach the ridge. The spot was pretty in an untouched kind of way. No fire ring, no signage, just a mostly flat patch of ground next to a slope that dropped into a wooded hollow. Kasha stood at the edge, looking down at the trees. She said, "It's perfect," and dropped her pack. We set up camp. The tent barely fit the space. The ground was uneven. We spent more time trying to stabilize it with rocks than anything else. Then we tried to cook. The camp stove sputtered to life, and we managed to soften up some zucchini and squash in a pan. It tasted like watery nothing, but we pretended it was amazing. We didn't talk much that night. Just sat by the fire, staring into the flames like we were trying to hypnotize ourselves into feeling relaxed. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was off. No bugs. No rustling leaves. Not even distant owls. Just the pop of damp wood and the occasional shift of fabric as we moved. I remember saying, "It's too quiet." Kasha just shrugged. "That's kind of the point, isn't it?" We went to bed early. She fell asleep right away. I didn't. I lay there staring at the ceiling of the tent, waiting for some sound, any sound. And when it finally came, I wasn't ready for it. Leaves crunching, not fast. One slow step after another. The kind of movement that didn't belong to an animal. It had rhythm, like someone pacing. I didn't move. Just listened, heart hammering in my chest. Kasha snored softly next to me, completely out. I kept telling myself it was nothing, a raccoon, maybe a deer. I didn't even believe it, but I needed to. Eventually, I forced myself to close my eyes and drifted off. In the morning, I stepped out of the tent and immediately noticed something. The ground about 30 feet away was different, not dug up, but marked. A long, narrow drag line in the dirt, like something had been pulled. Not a tire. Not animal tracks. Just one smooth groove leading away into the trees. I pointed it out to Kasha. She looked at it, then looked at me. "You probably dragged your boot or something," she said. I hadn't. I knew I hadn't, but I didn't push it. We spent the afternoon exploring the ridge, looking for other trails or maybe a better view. The forest up there felt older than the rest, denser, darker, like it had been left untouched for decades. Eventually, we found this rock formation that stopped us both in our tracks. A wide outcrop shaped like a mouth, not a natural arch, but something crumbled and collapsed, like an old shelter or a shrine. It felt wrong. I stepped closer, half curious, and saw something inside the hollow.
White.
Arranged. A spiral about a foot across, made from small bones, birds, rodents, something with long vertebrae.
Clean. Bleached. Perfectly placed.
Like whoever made it had taken their time. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Kasha stepped back and said, "Nope, we're done." We didn't talk the whole way back to camp. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I kept the flashlight in my hand just in case. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. They weren't close, but they were circling us. Wider loops this time. I clicked the flashlight. Nothing. I opened it. Checked the batteries.
Fresh.
Still nothing. And then I heard whispering. Not in the trees. Not from outside. From underneath. It was like the dirt was breathing words. Faint, garbled syllables, like someone whispering through a wall of soil. I froze. Then I felt the tent shift, not from a breeze, not from the wind. A slow, looping movement rising from below. The ground under Kasha's legs bulged slightly, like something underneath was pushing upward. Her eyes flew open. She grabbed my hand. I grabbed the knife, useless, but it felt better than nothing. Neither of us said a word. We just ran out of the tent into the trees, barefoot, half-dressed, crashing through brush. The cold barely registered. We ran until we hit the orange tape Kasha had tied to a tree near the trailhead. Then we stopped, panting, shaking, listening. Nothing followed us. The forest was still.
Too still.
At sunrise, we went back. Packed in silence. The tent was intact. Our stuff was fine. But the earth beneath it, flat again, smooth. No sign of movement. No trace of what had happened. Except one thing. Carved into the trunk of a birch tree nearby, fresh, deep, was a spiral. Same shape as the one made of bones. It hadn't been there before. We hiked out. Didn't speak the entire way. Halfway through the drive back to Knoxville, Kasha broke the silence. She said, "We're never telling anyone about this." I nodded. Okay.
And we didn't.
This happened when I was 24. I was stuck, not just emotionally wrecked, but really stuck. You know that feeling when you can't tell if you're sad or numb? Like you're just going through the motions? That was me. I just crawled out of a long, drawn-out breakup that felt more like surviving a storm than ending a relationship. So when Maddie called and said, "Let's disappear for a bit," I said yes before she finished the sentence. We didn't plan much. That was the whole point. Just throw a tent and a couple of sleeping bags into our old Subaru, fill the cooler with whatever didn't need cooking, and drive. Head south on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Stop when we felt like it. Sleep where it made sense. Maddie called it our escape tour. For me, it felt more like therapy. The first few days were easy, peaceful even. No phone calls. No emails. Just mountains, trees, and Maddie humming along to a playlist we'd built back in college. We'd stop at trailheads we found by accident, hike until our legs screamed, then set up camp somewhere we could watch the stars. There was something about the simplicity that worked. I didn't feel healed or anything, but I wasn't drowning either. On day 4, we found a side road.
Gravel.
Narrow. Barely maintained. The kind of road you wouldn't even notice unless you were specifically looking for a detour. Maddie saw it first. "Let's try this one," she said. No sign. No marker. Just a faint tire track disappearing into the trees. I didn't hesitate. We lost signal within 10 minutes. No GPS. No bars. Nothing but trees on either side and the crunch of gravel under the tires. We figured it had to loop back to the highway eventually. We'd done dumb, spontaneous detours like this before, ones that led to hidden waterfalls or tiny towns with great coffee. But this time felt different. After an hour, the road narrowed to a point where branches were tapping the roof. The sun started dropping behind the trees, and I realized we hadn't seen another car, house, or even a mailbox in the last 30 miles. Just forest thicker than it had any right to be. Then Maddie pointed. A sign nailed to a birch tree, handmade, faded red paint, chipping and uneven. It said, "Camp Elizabeth Hollow, 1 mile." I laughed. That sounds like where people go missing. Maddie smirked. Exactly why we have to check it out. so we turned in. I wish we hadn't. The road led to a clearing, a rough circle cut into the trees. There was an old fire pit choked with ash, and the crumbled remains of 2 picnic tables. No cabins. No welcome sign. Just overgrowth and silence. No birds. No bugs. Not even wind. I stepped out of the car and felt it in my chest, that tight, pressing feeling like I'd walked into a room I wasn't supposed to be in. Maddie got out slowly. She didn't say anything for a minute, just looked around. "Do you hear anything?" she finally asked.
No, I said.
Nothing at all. We debated leaving, but daylight was fading fast, and the thought of backtracking on that gravel road in the dark wasn't exactly appealing. So we stayed. We set up the tent quickly, throwing it together like it would somehow protect us. Maddie made a weak joke about horror movies, and I gave a half laugh just to pretend everything was fine. Dinner was soup and crackers. We sat on a log by the fire, saying less and less as the dark crept in. The fire gave off this weird flickering glow that made everything around us look too sharp. Around 10 p.m. it started. A twig snapping, slow, deliberate. Not rustling.
Not wind. Steps.
Maddie stiffened. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. "Yeah." We both froze, listening. Another snap, closer. I stood up and threw more logs on the fire, trying to make it flare.
I didn't say anything. Neither did she.
Then Maddie said, quiet and sharp, "We're sleeping in the car." We grabbed our stuff and got in, locking the doors. Pushed the seats back, bundled under jackets, trying to shake the feeling off. "We're being paranoid," she muttered. Could have been an animal. But neither of us slept. We sat in silence, flinching at every small noise. Then, maybe around 1 a.m., I heard it. Asterisk pause.
Tap.
Tap. Asterisk.
So soft.
I thought I was imagining it. Then I realized it was coming from the back seat window, right behind Maddie's head. I turned slowly. There was a handprint, faint, fogged, pressed against the inside of the glass. I couldn't breathe. I reached over, grabbed her arm, and whispered, "Don't look. Just move." She turned anyway. Her face went pale. She didn't scream, just nodded. We started the car and drove. No talking. Just gravel flying and headlights slicing through the woods. Every shadow looked wrong. Every tree looked like it might move. We drove for hours. No signs. No landmarks. Just forest. Right after sunrise, we found a paved road. I almost cried. It led to a gas station. Old. Faded. One of those places that looks abandoned until you realize the neon, open sign is still glowing in the window. We went in shaking. The guy behind the counter didn't even blink. "You girls coming from Ellison Hollow?" he asked. I froze. "You know it." He nodded. "Used to be a camp. Closed after some folks went missing. Rangers tried to shut it down. Guess they missed a few roads." Maddie asked, "What happened to them?" The man looked up. His eyes were wrong, too calm. Some places don't like being remembered. We didn't say anything else. Just left. We didn't stop again until we found a motel with working locks and thick walls. I didn't sleep, but I didn't care. It felt like something was behind us the whole way, and we finally outran it. Back home, I tried to find it, Camp Ellison Hollow. Searched maps, forums, old records. Nothing. It doesn't exist. But a week later, I was cleaning out the back seat of Maddie's car, wiping down the windows. And I saw it again. That same handprint inside the glass. I wiped it off. The next morning it was back. My name's Eric, and I don't talk about this often. Honestly, it still messes with my head, but I think I need to say it just once. It started with a dumb question I asked my grandfather. We were sitting on his porch, just the two of us, sipping his jet black coffee and watching the trees fade into evening. I asked if he'd ever seen anything weird out in the woods, ghosts, cryptids, anything like that. I was joking. He wasn't. He stopped rocking. Just froze, coffee halfway to his lips. Then he looked at me and said, "You know where Kessler Ridge cuts between Dry Creek and Bell Hollow?" I shook my head. "Good," he said. "Don't ever go near it." I laughed, thinking he was just spinning another one of his tall tales. But his face didn't change. Then he told me what happened in the fall of '54. He and his friend Calvin Darnell went hunting out there. They were both 17, itching to get out one last time before the snow made the backwoods impassable. They packed light, rifles slung over their shoulders, and crossed into the hills at first light. The trails weren't marked, just old mining roads and deer tracks. He said the silence hit them first. No birds, no bugs, no rustle of squirrels. Just the crunch of their boots and that weird heaviness in the air, like the woods were holding their breath. After a few hours, nothing looked familiar. Ridges blurred together. Landmarks vanished. The path behind them had disappeared like it had never been there. They tried the radio, just static. But not random static. He swore it sounded like slow breathing. Then they stumbled on the clearing. Perfectly round. Trees bent inward like they'd been trained to bow. And right in the middle stood an old wooden building. Not quite a church, but shaped like one. Roof sagging, window shattered. The glass left in the frames was all mismatched colors. One pane cloudy red, another pale green, like they'd been stolen from different places. No cross. No bell. Just thick beams covered in carvings, spirals, scratches, some that looked like antlers, others like teeth. They should have turned back. He knew it. But Calvin was already starting to shiver, and they didn't have shelter. My grandfather, always practical, figured they'd spend the night there and get their bearings at dawn. Inside, it smelled like wet stone and something worse, something metallic and sour. The pews were rotted. The pulpit stained dark with something he didn't want to identify. The floor creaked like it was alive under them. Still, they ate in silence and took shifts at the window. Around midnight, Calvin shook him awake. "There's something out there," he whispered, crouched low with binoculars raised. My grandfather joined him, and saw it too. At the edge of the clearing, standing perfectly still. At first it looked like a deer, long legs, thin body, pointed head, but it didn't move right. It stood too straight. Its limbs were too long, and its eyes, they glowed. Not reflected light, glowing like little red coals. "It's watching us," Calvin said. They bolted the door, shoved broken furniture against it, tried to stay calm. Then the lantern flickered and went out. They relit it. It sputtered, burned for a moment, then died again. The oil was fine. The wick was new. Nothing made sense. Calvin stepped back. "It's gone," he said. "But the dear thing, it's not there anymore." Then, asterisk thud star. Heavy. Directly above them. Dust rained from the rafters. They froze. The wood groaned overhead. A tongue, black, shiny, thick like a tree branch, slid down through a hole in the ceiling. It wrapped around Calvin's throat in an instant. He screamed. Fought. Blood poured from where it had jabbed into his neck. My grandfather fired. The tongue snapped back, slithering into the dark. He dragged Calvin away, pressing down on the wound. No thinking, just action. Then they ran out the door into the woods, blind and panicked. Branches whipped their faces. Rocks tore at their boots. They didn't stop. Couldn't. When they finally collapsed, lungs heaving, my grandfather turned back. It was on the roof. Didn't move. Just crouched there like a gargoyle. Black skin, twisted antlers, a long, stretched face that wasn't fully human, wasn't fully anything. And its eyes still glowing, still smiling. They kept going until gravel scraped beneath their boots. A ranger found them just after dawn and took them to the hospital. Calvin survived, barely. Never spoke about it again. Neither did my grandfather. Not for decades. Not until that night with me. At the end of the story, he looked me square in the eye and said, "They call it the Hollow One. Could be a spirit. Could be something older. I don't know. I just know it's still out there." Then he leaned in. "I don't care if you believe me. Just don't go near Kessler Ridge after dark." And I haven't. Because when he said that, his voice was steady, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. And I've never forgotten the look in his eyes. My name's Darren. I'm 32. I work maintenance at a school in Ellery, North Carolina. Nothing fancy. fixing leaky sinks, resetting circuit breakers. But I spend my weekends out in the woods. Always have. I grew up around the Appalachian trails, and I know the terrain like second nature. This happened last October. I was hiking solo up an old ridge trail behind Baldwin Peak, not on most maps, just a side path my dad showed me years ago. I had my dog Milo with me, a shepherd lab mixed with bad hips and zero awareness of his own size. Usually, he lumbers along behind me, but that day he kept pulling ahead like he had somewhere to be. About an hour in, I noticed the quiet. At first, I thought it was just a break in the usual bird song. But then I realized it was more than that. No wind. No rustling leaves. Nothing. Even our footsteps sounded dull, like the forest was swallowing the noise. Then I felt it. This weird warmth slid through me, not like getting overheated, but like something had just switched off the aches in my legs and unclenched every muscle in my back. I felt good. Too good. Like I'd had a drink I didn't remember taking. And then Milo stopped. He froze mid-step, ears perked, staring at a thicket just off the trail. Then he barked, once, short and sharp, and lunged. I barely caught his leash, nearly fell flat trying to hold him back. That's when I heard something move in the brush. It didn't sound like a rabbit or a deer. It was heavy,
Slow.
like something huge trying to move quietly and not quite pulling it off. Then came this sound. Wet, like hooves hitting soft ground. Asterisk thud. Schlup. Thud. Asterisk. It felt like whatever it was should have been right in front of me, but there was nothing there. The branches moved. The ground shifted. But it was empty. I could see where it should have been, but it wasn't. Then I noticed the moss right in front of us. The ground sank, like something had stepped down hard. You could see the shape. 2 feet, way too big to be human. Not prints exactly, just pressure. Pine needles bent. Leaves flattened. But nothing was making the shadows you'd expect. And then it screamed. Not a roar. Not an animal call. Lower than a bear, but sharper, metallic, like steel tearing through rebar. It vibrated my chest. Milo hit the ground, belly flat. My ears rang for a solid minute after it stopped. Everything went still again. I wanted to run. Every part of me told me to move, but I didn't. That warmth was still there, like someone had slipped something into my blood, just enough to keep me standing there like an idiot. And worse, I felt the stupid, overwhelming need to see it. Like if I could just lay eyes on it, I'd understand something important. But I didn't. Not that day. Over the next 2 weeks, every time I hit the trails, the same thing happened. It followed me, always off to the side, about 30 feet out. Sometimes behind. Sometimes ahead. No footsteps when I stopped. No sounds when I looked. Just pacing me like it was waiting. Eventually, I said out loud, half to myself, "You can't get me if I stay on the trail." And it stopped. That day, the sound just vanished. No more pacing. Until the last time. It was late October. I was coming down from Greer's Point, Milo dragging behind me. We stopped at a clearing where the trail opens up. Nothing unusual. I was catching my breath. Milo flopped in the dirt behind me. Then it crossed the ridge. 80 feet ahead. Something shimmered between 2 trees. I don't know how else to describe it. It was shaped like a person, but the edges blurred, like light through heat. I couldn't see details, but I knew it was big.
Broad.
Moving on 2 legs. Something about the way it walked made the hair stand up on my arms. And then it turned its head. I didn't see a face, just the motion. But it was enough. Like it knew I saw it. Then it was gone.
Gone fast.
Milo didn't bark. He just stared, ears pinned back, body frozen in place. And I didn't chase it. Didn't move at all for a long time. Since then, I've been back out there, but I stick to the main trails now. I tell people where I'm going. I carry a compass, a whistle, a flashlight, stuff I used to think was overkill. I still bring Milo. But he never pulls ahead anymore.